Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming tonight. My name is Claire. I'm the event coordinator at Village Books and Paper Dreams in Bellingham and Lynden, Washington. We are delighted that you could all make it this evening to our virtual readings gallery. Before we get started, there are a couple of announcements that I want to make. Some things about Crowdcast, if you've never been on a Crowdcast event before. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a little green follow button. If you click on the follow button, then you'll get to see all of the events that we have coming down the road here at Village Books. So we are continuing our robust event programming that you're used to, that we're known for. So I encourage you to hit that follow button so you'll see what we have coming down the road. Also, speaking of events that are coming up, I want to let you know about one that's going to happen on Monday night. That's November 16th at 7 p.m. We are going to welcome Edwina Norton. She's a Bellingham author. This is her memoir. It's called Autumn Light, My 50 Years in Zen. And Edwina is going to be interviewed. She's going to be in conversation with me. So I hope I'll see you on Monday night, November 16th at 7 p.m. for that conversation. Let's see. We are so delighted to see the chat on the right-hand side of the screen. Thank you to everyone for saying hello and all the well wishes. I want to let you know that I am going to disable the chat. I'm going to go ahead and do that right now, but this is only temporary. I promise. We will bring the chat back up for the Q&A portion of the event tonight. If you think of a question that you want to ask throughout the conversation tonight, if you look at the bottom of the screen, you'll see it says Ask a Question. If you want to ask a question of the authors tonight, just click on Ask a Question and a little dialog box will pop up. You type in your question, hit enter, and we will just gather those questions and get to them whenever we do the Q&A period. So I strongly encourage you to use that feature so that you don't forget those questions as they occur to you during the conversation tonight. Again, that's the Ask a Question feature at the bottom of the screen. And as I said, we will bring the chat back up for the Q&A so that you can offer some feedback and ask even more questions that way too. I do want to state, it's very important that everyone know that our virtual readings gallery is a safe space. Any user exhibiting offensive, hateful, or inappropriate behavior will be dismissed from the event immediately. And then lastly, the last button I want to show you on this screen is this little green one right here that says Purchase Answer Creek Here. If you click on that button, it takes you straight to the Village Books website where our authors' books are listed. If you're feeling so inspired this evening, we would appreciate your support of the authors and of an independent bookstore here in the Pacific Northwest. We would love it if you would purchase the books from Village Books. So again, that's that green button right there. If you're watching this recorded on YouTube, if you look below in the description, there is a link straight to the Village Books website there too. Okay, so enough of the housekeeping. And now a little bit about our guest speakers tonight. So our moderator tonight is Julie Christine Johnson. She's the award-winning author of the historical fantasy In Another Life and the contemporary eco-lit The Crows of Beara. Her short stories and essays have appeared in several journals and anthologies, and she holds undergraduate degrees in French and psychology and a master's in international affairs. Julie is the director of development and finance at an arts nonprofit, where she writes grant proposals and balances the books. She also leads writing workshops and seminars and offers developmental editing and writer coaching services. So we're very grateful to Julie for moderating our conversation tonight. And now for our featured author. A native New Yorker, Ashley E. Sweeney now lives and writes in LaConner, Washington. In her 25 years living in Whatcom County, Sweeney worked for the Lynden Tribune, Lynden Christian Schools, Whatcom Literacy Council, Bellingham Technical College, and the Nooksack Indian Tribe. Her first novel, Eliza Waite, won PNWA's Nancy Pearl Award, and we were so pleased to host her in person in our readings gallery to a packed house for Eliza Waite. So Answer Creek, this one right here, is her second novel, and we're pleased to announce that it has just won the Arizona Authors Association Award for Fiction. So congratulations to Ashley. Tonight is particularly special because it is the final event on her virtual tour for Answer Creek. So we are so glad that you could all join us for this very special event. So I encourage you, if you happen to have a favorite beverage, you might want to have it handy for later. We may raise a glass for a toast. So please join me in your homes with a warm welcome for Julie Christine Johnson and Ashley Sweeney.
Claire, thank you. That was a wonderful introduction. Ashley, it is so good to see you.
It's wonderful to see you too, Julie. I wish we could be together.
We will be. We will be. Ashley, you and I met in October of 2014 at the Whidbey Island Writers Conference. And it was the last Whidbey Island Writers Conference that happened. And so what a gem of an experience and a memory. And here we are 6 years later, now both published authors and in conversation in one of our dream bookstores, Village Books. What a joy. As authors, we enter a book launch and ushering our works into the world with a lot of emotions, and we try to enter the experience with open hearts and to be prepared for any eventuality. A pandemic was probably not the eventuality that you were thinking of as you prepared your book tour for Answer Creek. What has it been like for you? How did you, when did you realize that everything had changed and that this may not happen? And when did you pull it back together and say, yeah, this is going to happen. It's just going to look a lot different?
Well, Julie, that's a wonderful question to begin with, because we've all been faced with this pandemic and the fallout from it since early March. Now, early March was only 2 months before my pub date. And by that time, my publicist had a robust nationwide book tour planned. And after you've been published for the first time, you know that after all those lonely hours of writing, that you're going to get on the road and you're going to meet readers. So it's a real buoyant time. So that was, cold water was poured all over that right away. And the publicist and I had to take a hard left turn and say, we need to do this differently. I had not heard the word Zoom before March. And now all of my events have been on Zoom and Crowdcast and some other medium. There is a silver lining, though. While we'd love to be sitting in the basement of Village Books all together today, there are people online tonight, including my father, who's up way past his bedtime in Maryland tonight, here supporting me. Many friends from Whatcom County, my book club members here from LaConner, some college friends. And for those of you who I don't know, I'd like to welcome you in and thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Do you imagine doing it this way again? I'm just thinking of, you know, I know I did a few book clubs via FaceTime, which now seems so antiquated compared to Zoom, but talking about those advantages to doing it this way. Are you excited to go back to an in-person? Would you continue on with the virtual?
Probably a hybrid, a little bit of both.
Yeah.
Traveling to the East Coast is my home and I love to go there, but it could be that I would have events that weren't all strung together in a several week period. So a Zoom event would work if I could do that as well. But to tell you the truth, it's really been exhausting, even though I haven't traveled past my office. Just the emotional energy of having to do many, many events. And tonight being my last one, I have a baby bottle of Prosecco here for later to celebrate.
I know Claire and Ashley didn't didn't tell me this, so I went and made myself a cup of tea. And had I known that we were imbibing. Actually, let's talk about Answer Creek. I love this book so much. How did you meet Ada, the young woman who is at the heart of the story? How did the author and the character come together?
I actually met Ada in the form of a junior high school friend named Ann Thomas, who I met in my 7th grade homeroom in Huntington, New York in 1969. We sat at the same table together, and we've been fast friends for 50 plus years now. She's tall and lean and lanky. She's no nonsense. She's gritty. She calls a spade, and she's the first person who I ever met in my life who had been adopted. So when I was auditioning my character, Ada, which we do as authors, Anne kept popping into my mind, and I asked her if she wouldn't mind if I modeled the character of Ada Weeks after her persona and her physical traits. And she was just thrilled about that. She would have told me no right away, Julie, if she hadn't agreed with that. What was really interesting about that is I had a live muse. Often we have a muse that's a fictional character or someone who's deceased, but I had a live muse. So when I would encounter a situation where I would ask myself, what would Ada do? All I had to do was contact Anne, and she would help me through those situations. So she's a terrific gal, and we had hoped to launch together at a bookstore in Truckee, California, near to Donner Lake earlier in the season. And of course, that couldn't happen. But perhaps it'll happen at another time.
You've commented that this story wrote itself as you conducted the research, but what were some of the really challenging scenes for you to write? What did you struggle with?
Anyone who takes on the Donner Party story is going to face multiple challenges. Of course, I wanted to be as true to historical record as possible, but inserting a fictional character such as Ada Weeks gives me the opportunity to have someone else be the eyes and ears along that journey. So one of the very, very hardest scenes to write was when Ada lost her friend Eleanor. Now remember, or if you haven't read Ada's story yet, she's been twice orphaned, and she's very reticent to get close to anybody. She forms a friendship with a lovely woman named Eleanor, and I just have one paragraph that I'm going to read. I was weeping as I wrote it. Ada smooths Eleanor's hair and shudders her eyes. Eleanor Priscilla Eddy, age 25, loving wife of William Eddy, mother of James 3 and Margaret 1, lately of Belleville, Illinois, is dead. Ada runs her hands down the length of her friend's bodice and tucks Eleanor's once clean blouse into her soiled skirt. She repositions the corpse like Augustus would have done, the dead woman's hands crossed on her chest, her head propped on a small pillow. Ada removes Eleanor's boots. Her friend won't have much use for them where she's going. Ada lowers her head onto Eleanor's chest. Once there had been a heartbeat. Now her chest is cool. Goodbye, Ms. Eddy. God be with you. Oh, it's still, I mean, even though I wrote it, I can still get choked up over that scene. When you have a friend who is so dear and you go through such a traumatic experience together and you lose that friend in the midst of it, it's devastating. And even though people might think, oh, well, an author just writes a scene. We don't just write a scene, we live the scene alongside of our characters. So a lot of the Truckee or Donner Lake scenes were difficult to write. Remember, they were locked in windowless cabins for 124 days with nothing to eat, shoe leather and blankets and book covers, before some of them, descended into the depravity of cannibalism. So very, very, very difficult subject matter. I wanted to show their collective humanity and not vilify them.
As you're reading that scene, it struck me that one of the themes that you really dig deep into in your work, and this appeared in both Eliza Waite and in Answer Creek, is a theme of abandonment. And it struck me because I realized that that's something that I, without intending to, and I think this happens a lot with authors, we don't set out to write about themes, but those themes come out in our work, and they come out consistently for many of us. And I write a lot about abandonment, and that's why so much of your work resonates so deeply with me, because there are these women, these strong women who come into their own despite having been abandoned, often through tragedy, through death of loved ones, of family, of partners. And is this something that you have been aware of as an author? Is this something that you have come to realize? What does this theme mean to you, and maybe why do you think it's appearing in your work?
Well, I can't speak for all artists, but I can certainly speak as an author, artist, that we are tormented souls. Authors are tormented souls. And we look at the underbelly of life, and we hold up a mirror to that underbelly. And through our characters, readers can see a way through their own trauma. Do you remember that wonderful children's book, We're Going on a Bear Hunt? And the refrain keeps saying, we can't go over it, we can't go under it, we can't even go around it, we have to go through it. And that's how I feel as an author, that we have to go through that trauma, and then through our characters, and then our reader brings his or her own experiences and biases and worldview to any book they pick up. And they are working through their own trauma. They're looking to our characters to see how our characters did it. And in very good fiction, we can see how a character is able to move through trauma. And so abandonment in this case is probably the greatest trauma. That and starvation. And survivor guilt plays deeply into Answer Creek.
And that's the beauty of good fiction, is that emotional catharsis for the reader, that fiction is able to take on topics that we aren't always able to face in the news or in creative nonfiction or in history. That fiction allows us a way in to our own traumas and our own perspectives. Let's talk about writing historical fiction. You and I both have experiences of taking historical events and inserting fictional characters who interact with real historical characters. Let's talk about the ethics of a fiction author writing true history, and how you take on inserting a fictional character into, and particularly something like this that is so sensitive, the history of the Donner Party and the Donner family, and trying to envision what they went through, and really adding a humane quality to their experience that has been so mistreated by history.
Writing historical fiction, we can be our own worst enemies, because if we're in the camp that everything has to be as historically accurate as possible, writing historical fiction takes about twice as long as writing contemporary fiction. So I'm in that camp, and I go down a lot of rabbit holes. I put a lot of placeholders in my manuscripts to go back and check. So my readers can trust me that I've done my homework. I majored in literature and history. I love that aspect of writing, the research arm of writing. And so you as a reader can trust me that the historical portion of the story is true. Now I have to create an entire plot arc and character arc for a fictional woman who I'm inserting into this realm. But I'm free then. I'm free to have her look how I want her to look, feel how I want her to feel. And she teaches me along the way too. That's the magic that happens while you're writing is how your characters do write the story. And so I'm just have to be in touch with the character and how she is doing. One thing, Julie, I don't know about you, but I don't write chronologically. I write scenes as I feel moved to write them. And then by the time I'm finished with my first draft, I have to make sure that there's no holes in any of the plot arc or the character arc. If I wrote chronologically, that might not happen, but I feel like I have to bring my best self to my desk every morning, and I don't want to be sitting there not wanting to write. I want to write. And so I'll pick a scene. It could be months down the road in the story and pick up there. And I never have writer's block. I know some people have writer's block, but that's something that doesn't affect me, and perhaps that's because I don't write chronologically.
I think that's a wonderful resource and tool to employ to give yourself the permission to write what you need to write when you need to write it. And I'm the same way, and I may know that a scene needs to be inserted, and so I might make a note in the outline or in the manuscript itself that, you know, just an idea of what needs to go in there, but just to keep going and to trust that the writing will take care of itself, but to follow the words where they lead you. I think writers and writers who feel like there's a specific formula they need to follow can get sort of wrapped around the axle and stall themselves in that process. But you're right. How do you not let the research overwhelm the writing, and what is the interplay in your practice between doing the research and then setting that aside and getting to the story and then weaving those together?
Well, remember, I was an investigative reporter for 10 years, and I was on a deadline every week. So I would get my story assignment, and I would have about 5 days to have a master's degree in that subject. And over 10 years as a features writer, you can imagine how many subjects I had to cover. I had to learn about Vietnamese pot-bellied pigs, and I had to learn about farming machinery, things that a girl from New York doesn't come in contact with very often. And so I have to have a self-imposed deadline on myself. And even up till the point that I push send, and I'm sure you and other authors would agree, you're never really finished with the manuscript. Yeah. It's just that your deadline has come, and it's time, it's 4:59 and on the Friday afternoon, and you need to push send. And so I'm at peace with that, Julie, because I've I've been methodical about my research. I take a lot of notes. Every time I read a book, I put placeholders in the book, then I transpose all of the notes into black and white composition notebooks. I go over those notebooks once, twice, 3 times to make sure I'm using all the information. You'll never be finished with research if you don't have a deadline. And so I'm at peace with that when the time comes, I know 9 times more than what I put in the manuscript. And instead of giving you an info dump and trying to show off about my research, I just put in what's necessary for that scene or that chapter. And then we can use a lot of that other information when we give lectures at libraries or at civic clubs, or if we do virtual events with certain groups. So it's not for naught, all of that research. And I truly enjoy it.
Oh, it's wonderful. And it shows. It's wonderful. Ashley, in addition to abandonment being a prevalent theme that I discovered in both Eliza Waite and in Answer Creek, your female characters, Eliza and Ada, both have this wonderful agency over their sexuality. And you imbue in these women desire and sexual awakening at a time in both these time periods where women were more than likely sort of locked up in corsets and really put into roles that diminished that potential. What opened the door for you to write characters that had such gorgeous and rich expressions in their bodies and in their sexuality, to just own that?
Well, at every woman's core is her sexuality. And I wasn't going to diminish that women throughout history are sexual beings. These women at home perhaps were more stifled when they lived under their parents' roofs. But the journey, each of them are on a journey. Eliza Waite during the Klondike Gold Rush in 1898, and Ada Weeks on the Oregon-California Trail in 1846 and 1847. The journey is, their agency is unleashed along that journey. And so I was able to have them discover and harness their sexuality without being erotic. I wanted it to be more of a suggestion that this is a very important piece of who each one of these women is.
Beautiful. How has your writing practice changed since the publication of your first novel of Eliza Waite? How has it evolved to bring you to the publication of Answer Creek and what you're working on now?
Well, from the first day that I set out to write Eliza Waite until the day of publication was an 8-year journey. I was working full-time for the Nooksack Indian Tribe at that time. I still had my youngest son at home in high school. And so writing was relegated to late at night. I know you're an early morning person, Julie, but I'm a late at night person. And so, and weekends, that was it. And that's why my first novel, that's one reason my first novel took so long. There was a lot of craft that I needed to learn during that time as well. And that meant going to numerous workshops and conferences and master classes to learn the craft. Even though I've been a voracious reader since age 5, it's different to be a reader than to be a writer. And so there was a lot to learn during that time. Now, Answer Creek, I retired early, so I set a self-imposed schedule for myself. From 9 to 1, I would be at my desk every day except Sunday. that doesn't mean I'm not thinking about the book all the time, because I am. These characters are very real to me. And my daughters have chided me on that. One day, it was Eliza's birthday, and I said it into the air, "Happy birthday, Eliza." And my younger daughter, Annie, was like, "Oh, Mom." So it's just, they're very real to me,
Yeah.
and they'll continue to be real to me. In fact, when I finish a book, I feel like, someone asked me, "Who was your favorite character?" I'm like, there's no way I can ever answer that. I can't say who's my favorite child, even though they might want to hear that. They're not going to hear that. They're all my favorite children, and all my characters are my favorite characters. So there's a real symbiosis between an author and characters. So that's the answer to that part of the question, anyway.
You know, and we do become so attached to these stories and these lives that we have created, or that somehow live through us and live through our words. And it's amazing as an author to do these events and to meet readers and get that feedback and realize that our words have touched other people. I mean, I can't believe that people read my books, you know, like it's really happening. But the other side of that is looking at that feedback from a bit of a distance and kind of keeping yourself a little bit safe and protected from your own fame, as it were. Do you read your book reviews? And if so, how do you mitigate the highs and the lows?
I do. I read them about once a month on a Sunday afternoon. I go to the different various reviewing sites and I read them, and the good outweighs the bad by a large margin. I really love to be affirmed with 4- and 5-star reviews, and a lot of 3-star reviews are actually very good. The reader might have an issue with the ending, especially with Answer Creek. I've had a lot of people have an issue with the ending. So if you haven't read it yet, you have that to look forward to. A 1-star review doesn't bother me very much, because I feel that that's more of a reflection of the reader. They may have been looking for science fiction or romance or paranormal or mystery, and that's not what they're going to get. They might get little elements of some of those genres in my work, but basically it's going to be straight fiction. But a 2-star review, that's like a dagger in your heart, because they really, really, really did not like your work. And so a 2-star review is very hard to take, but like anything, it's not about our personhood, it's about our work. And so we have to just keep that in mind while we're reading the reviews. But the big trade reviews are the ones that are really important, and Answer Creek got really good trade reviews from Publishers Weekly and Kirkus and Booklist and Forward Reviews. So those are the biggies, and so you have a little bit more trepidation when you're opening those letters to see. But I love reviews. Reviews are wonderful. I like to leave reviews, and I also like to contact authors, and I love when readers contact me as well. So you can always contact me through my website at ashleysweeneyauthor.com. I love to get mail.
And to our audience out there, on behalf of all authors, please do leave us reviews. This is really critical on Amazon, on Goodreads. The more reviews that our books receive, the more that people see them. And it's so meaningful for us. So it doesn't matter if the review is good or bad, it matters that it's there. So we love it when you leave us reviews. What's the best money you ever spent as a writer? And I'll tell you why I'm asking that after you answer.
Nobody has ever asked me that question before, Julie. I love it. I'll say I know what it is. About 10 years ago, I spent a large amount of money to attend a master class at Hedgebrook, which is a women's writing retreat on Whidbey Island here in Washington State. And I studied for a week under the playwright Teresa Rebeck.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, as a journalist, well, first of all, I was a poet and then a journalist. So anything I was writing that that was a quote was something that someone else had said. I had never written dialogue. So I took this dialogue workshop for a week with Teresa Rebeck, and learning the craft of dialogue was the best money that I've spent of all of the workshops that I've taken. And I've taken many with some really terrific instructors, but learning about dialogue, entering a scene with dialogue, weeding out extraneous words, making dialogue short and snappy. You read it out loud. If it doesn't sound natural, you have to do something about that. So learning dialogue, and now it's coming a lot easier 10 years later.
Yeah.
Why? Why do you ask?
Well, I just, it's being an author and being a writer, the expectations of us are so high, and we have to now be our own publicists in many cases, and our own marketing specialists. And so I'm always curious to know how writers and authors invest in themselves and in their work. And so that I love that. I love that the focus is on craft, and that you chose something that is really timeless and that will just build on itself, because it's part of your practice and it's part of what makes you a writer, and that's priceless.
Well, I do have a personal goal, that each novel is better than the one before. That's in my opinion. The readers don't necessarily agree with that. They have their own favorites for their own reasons, and that's wonderful. But to come to my desk every day, I could never be a formulaic writer, Julie. I need to come to my desk and just drown in words. I labor over sentences, and just to be in the world of words every day, to me, is about the best. I love fabric stores too, and I love garden stores too, but bookstores and books and the world of words, that's what really keeps me sane.
I have some author friends who, while they're in the midst of working on a manuscript, writing a novel, can't read novels. It just is too much clutter. That is not me. I have to read them all the time, and I get so much feedback and just so much joy and relaxation in others' words. So I'm glad to hear that is the case for you as well. What's on your nightstand right now? What are you reading?
Oh, I just finished Glennon Doyle's Untamed, and I loved it. I should have read it decades ago, but it was just written this year, so I couldn't have. And I absolutely loved Inland by Taya Obrecht. It's probably the best novel I've read since Cold Mountain, and that's going on a couple of decades now. I just absolutely... It's a gorgeous, gorgeous novel. And last time I was at Village Books, this is what's on my nightstand, is Washington Black. This is the Whatcom Reads book for this next year. And so I haven't started it yet, but I'm looking forward to it. So this is next up for me. Yes, I'm a voracious reader, Julie, too. I have probably 3 books going at once, but this is interesting. Aside from my research, where I read a lot of nonfiction, I had been suffering a lot of anxiety, as a lot of us have been in the last few months, not just because of COVID, but also including COVID. And I've been reading a lot more nonfiction, and there's so much good narrative nonfiction out there. So that's been something that I've been really enjoying as well, is good narrative nonfiction.
Wonderful. If I can make along those lines, I'm reading All the Lives We Ever Lived, Finding Solace in Virginia Woolf. It's a braided memoir, literary criticism biography.
That sounds fascinating.
So yes, so if I can, and it is very cathartic and very healing, as well as very poignant. So I recommend that. What are you working on now?
Jericho is my new novel.
And
there's a story to that, Julie. I was 85,000 words into another manuscript, which, if you're wondering, in Readerland is about finished.
Yeah.
5,000 words is coming to the finish line. But again, when we were on lockdown and not knowing how much time we would be in lockdown, I thought, this is a once in a lifetime opportunity for me. I can't go anywhere or do anything. All my plans have stopped. So what will I do with this time that's gifted to me? So I put that manuscript aside and I sat in some long-held grief that I had been carrying for many decades. And working through that grief, my new novel is coming along. I'm working through my own grief through my character, Ruby Barlow. She's in rural Arizona in 1905, and she's a feisty little gal, like one of my daughters, I might mention, is a feisty little gal. And so I'm really enjoying writing Ruby's story. It's her story. It's not my story. But working through this long-held grief is cathartic for me, and it's really shaping a wonderful character who deals with a traumatic time, again, having to work through it, not going over it, not going under it, not going around it, but going through it.
Oh,
how about you? What are you working on, Julie?
I'm working on my fourth novel, which I hope will be the first of a series of crime fiction novels set here in Port Townsend. Oh. So this is definitely a departure for me.
I was going to say, talk about a left turn.
It is.
Good for you.
And yeah, so it's been a lot of fun. I have a character who is a retired Seattle police detective who worked in high crimes vice in Seattle and has returned to Port Townsend to take care of her ailing father, and lands in the middle of some nefarious activity happening here in on the Olympic Peninsula and the Olympic National Forest and Park and Port Townsend. So it's been a blast. I'm loving it.
Oh, I hope you can get to that. I know when you're working full time, it's difficult, but you get up early. You're very disciplined with your yoga and your writing. And so I have to hand it to you, Julie. Good for you.
Thank you. Keeping sanity. I want to make certain that we have time for our audience to step in and ask questions. And so Claire has turned on the chat. And I'm going to scroll down, and I also see we actually do have some questions. Claire, if I click on, oh, here we go. All right. Oh, Kristen. Oh, yay.
Our friend Kristen. Yes. Hi, Kristen. She was at the writers' conference with us. We were the Three Musketeers.
And we're still here. We're still together, and we will get together in person soon. Kristen is asking if there are other historic time periods that you want to write about, and it sounds like you have changed time frames a little bit with Jericho, but
yes, I basically live in the 19th century, Kristen, but I'm putting my toes into the early 20th century here. Who knows? There are authors who, like Paula McLean, she writes historical fiction, and she just decided to do contemporary fiction after she had written, a handful of books. So for now, I'm definitely interested in the 19th century, but I do have an idea for a dual timeline, and that would be set in the 18th century and the 21st century.
Mm-hmm.
So there, I'm not quite sure about a dual timeline yet, but it's very popular, and that's on my mind. I also have an idea of a novel based on the story of my great grandmother from Galway, Ireland, who comes alone to the United States and actually goes out west and runs a chuck wagon in Colorado. I've never based a character on a real person, but I think my great grandmother might be an exception there. So basically the 19th century, but I'll be open as time goes on.
I love it. Claire is asking, and this is such a great question, about novel endings. How do you know when you've come to the end? How do you know it's time to stop?
Well, I write the ending first.
You do.
And then I work. And then I work toward it. So I don't know where it's going to go in the middle, but I write it first. And I talk about laboring over sentences. It's I love the ending of Answer Creek. So for those of you who have had issue with it, that opens up another conversation, but I don't want to have any spoilers on tonight because a lot of you may not have read it. And if you haven't, I encourage you to click on that green button down below and support Village Books. Bookstores are the heartbeat of our communities, and they need us right now. There's nothing that we can't find at a bookstore. There's something for everyone. So I really encourage everyone here online to think about adding Village Books to your holiday shopping list.
Oh, absolutely. Ashley, do you, I feel like I know the answer to this, but I'm presuming with historical fiction, do you plot things out? How structured are you in your writing process? You're shaking your head. See?
Never. Never. No, I have a technique of daydreaming scenes like a screenwriter. So when I come to my desk, I set my characters in a certain scene at a certain time of day, and I close my eyes and I watch the scene unfold. And after about 5 or 10 minutes of that, then I come to the keyboard and I record that scene. So I don't come to my keyboard with an agenda of how that scene is going to unfold. I let it unfold in my imagination, and then that scene is recorded through my fingers. You look like you're I'm off my rocker.
I mean, I haven't approached a book the same way at any time, so I don't have a formula either. It happens. But how do you start the process? Where do you begin? Is it with a character, a setting, an incident, or is it?
Well, my books find me. I don't find them. So I don't sit down and labor over what I'm going to write because the books come to me, Julie, and they're waiting in line now. I've got 4 other ideas and they just have to wait in line. It's kind of like in gym class in elementary school when you'd have to, pick sides and you're like, pick me, but I can't pick them yet. They just have to wait. I have to give all of my energy to this character. Now, unlike being a mother, having 4 children in a short period of time, I couldn't just concentrate on one child at once. I had to have my emotional energy cross over 4 children at the same time. So with writing a novel, when that novel is finished, that child is, in the bookstore. And now I can put my attention to the next child, and then that child in the bookstore. So I need to give my full attention to the book that I'm working on. And so Ruby has my full attention right now.
No, I can't wait to meet her. Pat has a question. Could you talk about your writing rooms? One question. Also, could you mention one of the narrative nonfiction materials you're reading?
Sure. My writing room?
Yeah, it says rooms, but maybe it's just room.
Well, we live in a very small and lovely Cape Cod here in Laconer, and I'm actually in my husband Michael's office here with his beautiful native art behind me, and my desk is in the middle of the living room. In Tucson, where we live in the wintertime, that changes. And I have the beautiful office in Tucson filled with all Southwestern art, and Michael works at the dining room table. So it's a trade-off that we have with only one office in each of our homes. And so he has the office here and I have the office there, but it works. We make it work.
Oh,
and narrative nonfiction, well, actually, there's one on the Donner Party. I'm maybe Village Books has it. The Best Land Under Heaven by Michael Wallace. He's a prolific Western writer. And it's in the vein of Boys in the Boat or Astoria, that you can't put it down. It's that good. It reads like fiction, but it's completely historical. So Peter Stark's Astoria is another one. And then, of course, Daniel Brown's The Boys in the Boat.
Yeah, fantastic. Katrina is asking, who are some of your most important literary influences?
Thanks, Katrina. I love a lot of female authors. And talking about Virginia Woolf, she's probably my heroine. In contemporary authors, I would say Barbara Kingsolver, Sue Monk Kidd, Geraldine Brooks. And I just discovered, Molly Gloss from Oregon. I love Molly Gloss. And I've just discovered an Arizona author named Susan Lang, who I just think is absolutely terrific. So I do read male authors as well, but I tend to probably 2 to 1 read female authors. And I'll never write a character from a male perspective. I've decided that that's just something I'm not going to do. So all of my heroines will be female.
Oh, fantastic. Thank you, Ashley. Kate says it's so interesting to hear about your process. How many hours do you work in a typical day?
Well, I'm at my desk from 9 to 1, Monday through Saturday. And I have to say no to a lot of things. A lot of people they go walking in the morning, or they have coffee in the morning, or they go shopping in the morning. Well, we used to go shopping. But I have to say no to a lot of things. That's okay. I wake up, I have a simple breakfast and coffee, and I get to my desk, and I'm fully immersed in my scenes and my characters for at least those 4 hours. Sometimes it runs longer. I don't have an alarm. Maybe it's 2 o'clock. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 o'clock. But again, I'm thinking about the characters all the time. And I have a wonderful partner in my husband, Michael. He's completely invested in my success, in my retirement. And so he does research for me, and he bounces questions off of me. He's a devil's advocate, an early reader. And so he really should have a tiny little byline on the bottom of all of my novels because he's an integral part of the process. We travel to all of the places where my novels take place. So for Answer Creek, we traveled the length of the Oregon-California Trail 2 summers ago, over a month. And he was so prepared. He had put together maps and notebooks and journals that we read along the way, and we went off-road and went to the historical markers and museums, and he fully shares in the process and in my success. So for those of you who have ever wondered if you'll find love at a second chance, that it's definitely possible. On our very first date, we discovered the cabin that became the basis of Eliza Waite. So Eliza's been with us since our first date.
Oh, that's such a great story. I love that. And I would advise everyone to follow Ashley on Instagram because she does chronicle her journeys in beautiful photographs. Annie wants to know, besides Ada, who was your favorite character in Answer Creek to write about? And how did you get the idea for the man chapters? P.S. Hi, Mom.
Hi, darling. P.S. The man is my other favorite character. And I won't do any spoilers for those of you who haven't read Answer Creek, but you will be introduced to the man, and there will be a point later in the novel where you'll realize who he is, and you'll have that aha moment. I want you to have that all to yourself. But he definitely could have a novel dedicated to him. And just like Pearlie could have had a novel dedicated to her, Eliza's friend in Skagway. But I have too many ideas and not enough time to be writing prequels and sequels and partner novels with another character. But I absolutely love the character of the man, and his chapters were some of my favorite chapters to write, and I think some of my best writing. I'm very critical of my own writing, and I think some of the best writing is in the chapters about the man.
That's great. We're all going to go back and read those again.
Don't you do that too, Julie? You finish a book and you start the book all over again. You just want to go back and read the first chapter again. It's like you don't want to let them go. There's some books you just don't want to let go. I've heard a term recently called a book hangover, and so I get that. It's just it's hard to start a new book right away. You have to just, and so many characters will stick with you for decades. Absolutely, decades.
You do feel a kind of a sense of abandonment that you're letting these lives go, and they're off living on their own without you, and they've
and talking about characters being very real, when you're working with historical characters, for instance, the Donner brothers or James Reed, I feel like I know these people. I wish I could have coffee with them.
Find out the rest of the story.
Ashley,
we're coming to the end, and I know that you had a special message that you wanted to offer before we closed out. But let me just say what an absolute joy this has been to be in conversation and sharing this experience with you, sharing your final appearance on this tour, and what an honor that is. What an extraordinary woman and writer you are, and I'm so glad you are in my life. I'm going to start crying. And I wish you all the greatest success. I'm so thrilled with the awards that Ada has achieved so far, and may it live on and live on.
Thank you, my friend. I really appreciate it. Yes, I just want to thank my family, my friends from Whatcom County, my friends from Skagit County, my book club members, my sisters and sister-in-laws, my daughters who are on, some dear, dear friends, I just really thank you for supporting me. Now I get to go back into my quiet place, which as I was quite an extrovert as a child, and I've become much more of an introvert as an adult. And I can't wait to get back to my chair tomorrow morning and start the journey all over again. And I'll see you in a couple of years again, hopefully in person at Village Books. So thank Claire for Village Books has been so good to me. Thank you so much for sponsoring me tonight.
Well, it was my pleasure, and what a great discussion. The rapport between you two is it's very, very clear, very evident. So it was a lovely, natural conversation, and the story is so fascinating, Answer Creek, and I am very excited about. Did you say the next one is called Jericho? Mm-hmm. Well, I happen to have a feisty little gal named Ruby, so I'm very excited.
Oh, okay. We'll talk, Claire.
Yes. So gosh, you're getting all kinds of lovely accolades and well wishes in the chat there.
Oh, thank you, everyone.
So thank you both. And gosh, well, I have mine at the ready, so I'm going to say to Answer Creek, to Ashley, to Julie, thank you both so much.
Thank you.
This was. I have to drink because you can't just leave it unfinished.
Bye.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.